and some new people that I met, and we haven't seen in Westmoreland, so it's really great to have you here today. First, I want to say thank you to both our special events staff and education managers, Sarah Resnick and Hannah Vincent, who are here with us both today. I'm really glad to have them. And I want to make a very special thank you to our committee for the Westmoreland, headed by Sally Lauren, who couldn't be here today. Sally was really the person here who just envisioned this happening today, and really over the last couple of years just made sure that we could do this, we could get through COVID, and then come out today to have this event. And we're really sorry she's not here, but we have a very big thank you to her and all of the committee for the Westmoreland. Everyone really in that committee has worked tirelessly for today. Sally gave me some remarks today, so I apologize for reading them. But I was saying earlier that here at the Westmoreland, I'm also the CFO, Ms. Worthy, and so I typically only do things with paper in front of me. So I'm very comfortable when I've read something 10 times and I can talk about it, especially when the numbers on the page. And didn't have that opportunity today, so I'm going to read it. And these are really Sally's words, but we really also believe in them as well. I want to begin by saying, finally, 5 years ago, we began talking to Ms. King about a lecture on his then recent book about Mr. Rogers, the good neighbor. But due to scheduling, illness, COVID, it was delayed, postponed, put off. But the timing ended up being perfect. American Workman, The Life and Art of John Kane by Max and Louise Lippincott is hot off the press in 2022. It coincides perfectly with the Westmoreland's current exhibition, Gatecrashers, which features Kane as a self-taught artist. We certainly will invite you to come up with us after the book signing and the reception to come upstairs to the cantilever to see the exhibition. Maxwell King was editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, president of the Times Endowment, president of the Pittsburgh Foundation, as well the author of 2 books, one on Kane and one on Fred Rogers. Louise Lippincott is a historian of 3 curatorial jobs, first at the J. Paul Getty Museum, then at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and most recently at that little museum, west of the Carnegie Museum of Art. Just kidding, I was at that museum too. That was in her notes. While curator of fine arts at the Carnegie, she managed the largest collection of John Kane's works in the United States. Another curious fact is that her grandfather, Bertram Lippincott, was a managing editor for the earlier book on Kane called Skybooks, written by Marie McSwiggan in 1938. I think she was destined to write about Kane. Before we begin, we have some celebrities to introduce. 2 of John Kane's great granddaughters are here from Maryland. With Kathy Fleshman and Sue Wendell to the stand. We welcome you here today. Ironically, Sue worked for the AFL-CIO for 30 years. The apple is not too far from the tree. Pat McCardle is an art dealer who specializes in self-taught artists and introduced Max to Kane's work. Past partner, Meg Green, is here with them. Would you also please stand? And finally, John Fagan, the publicist and VP of marketing at the University of Pittsburgh Press, please stand, is with us today. He brought books today for purchase and signing, and we'll have those available also up here after the lecture. So getting back to the speakers, I'm going to find out how these 2 people managed to write 1 book, American Workman, The Life and Work of John Kane. Thank you.
It's on. Okay. Well, thank you, Suzanne, very much for that introduction. And thank all of you so much for coming in here on this beautiful early November day. It really is early November. And choosing to be here for this lecture. We really appreciate you having an interest in John Kane and his story and his history. As you know, if you've been upstairs to see the Gatecrashers exhibit, he's featured in that exhibit, which is really worth seeing, I think, more than once. So if you get a chance to go out later today, please do. John Kane was the first American self-taught artist to end up shown in major museums, not in specialty museums. And his fame has grown over the years, but not his notoriety. He's been little known until recently. He became very famous at the end of his life and then forgotten for a long period of time. And that brings me to the Pat McCarville part of the story, because Pat McCarville, an art dealer and art connoisseur from Pittsburgh, who specialized all his career in folk art and the art of self-taught artists, made a crusade, really, of understanding John Kane and bringing him to the attention of the public. And that's how I learned about John Kane. I first learned about him 20 years ago when I was working at the Heinz Endowments in Pittsburgh. As some of you may know, that the Heinz Endowments has a wonderful collection of the work of 20th century Pittsburgh artists. And from time to time, we would have in a dealer or a guest curator to look at the collection. And Pat one day said to me, pretty good collection you got there, but it's a shame you don't have a painting. And I said, what's a painting? I have no idea. I prided myself on thinking that I learned a little bit Pittsburgh art, but I knew nothing about John Kane. So Pat began my education telling you the story of John Kane's extraordinary, picaresque journey of a life. He was born in Scotland. He worked there as a very young boy. In the very earliest stage, drawing and sketching. He was drawn to that, I think when he was 8, 9, 10 years old. He worked in Westmoreland, Scotland, where he was born, and in a sailworks and Campbell factory. And he was doing pretty well. And then when he was about 20 years old, his stepfather, who I don't think he really liked that much, decided to move the whole family to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That was the promised land for good jobs. And John felt he had a good job. But nonetheless, because his mother, who he adored, implored him to come, John went to Pittsburgh in 1820. And he was 20 years old. In 1880, he came here. And he went to work in the railroad first. Then he worked in field work at the Edward Thompson Works in Bragg for Andrew Carnegie. He worked in the coal mines and the coke works for Henry Clay Frick. He worked as a street painter. He worked as a house painter, building painter, a construction worker. Did every job imaginable, all the while trying, teaching himself how to draw very well, and then later how to paint. Now, my interest in Kane was deep enough that I really began to pull together a lot of research with the help of Pat and study Kane, and then I got just like the work at the Heinz Endowments got very busy. When I retired from there, I got the opportunity to write the biography of Fred Rogers, and then that was followed by lots of speaking engagements for the Rogers book, and I went back to work for a while at the Pittsburgh Foundation, and then COVID. And when COVID hit, of course, had no more speaking engagements. I had retired from the Pittsburgh Foundation. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to be spending a lot of time at home. And as much as my wife Peggy loves me, I never thought so. So I dug out my Kane stuff and started working again, reading the research and started writing. And I wrote maybe 40% of the life story of Kane, and I hit a wall. Because I got to the time where I needed to be writing about his art, writing art criticism, art history, and I knew I had none of the training, none of the expertise, none of the understanding to write that part of the book. And I really thought to myself, well, I'll just do a biography. And then I thought, no, that would be just fathomable book. If I'm going to do a serious book on John Kane, really seriously explore his life, it's got to include as much on his art as anything else. So I was in a quandary, but I had the answer. I knew Louise Lippincott from the Carnegie Museum of Art. I knew her work there because we funded a number of things at the museum. I knew that she was had spent a lot of time with the largest Kane collection in the United States, which is at the Carnegie. But I also knew Louise's reputation. And Louise's reputation, a lot of you know Louise too, so you will recognize the reputation when I mention it. Louise does not suffer fools like she has a tough, very tough, critical intellect, which is perfect for this kind of work. And also, I thought, perfect for me, because I need someone who will punch holes in me when I'm going in the wrong direction. And that was a single stroke of genius that I had in putting this book together, was getting a little bit. If those of you who read the book will see that her understanding of his art and understanding of his character through that art is simply extraordinary. I should give you a chance to defend yourself from it.
Okay. Well, there's more to the story than Maxwell's on. I was in a similar COVID state, and he invited me to participate in the book. And equally desperate for something interesting to do. I also had a lot of frustration that in all my years at the Carnegie, and so my interest in Kane got deeper and deeper, and never got boring. But I never been able to really follow up on any of the questions that I had about his work, or bring him back to life, so to speak, in Pittsburgh. And so the opportunity Maxwell offered me was like, oh, this is something that it's unfinished business on the bucket list, all that good stuff. And the relationship with Max, when I hear about it from my point of view, yeah, I'm kind of tough-minded, and I love to do research, and I'm very fact-based, which is kind of unusual for some kinds of art historians. And Max called me his ideal investigative reporter. And I found him to be an excellent managing editor. And the back and forth we had as the book developed, beginning with his story of the life, which had already worked out, and then me skirmishing with the art, and then producing a lot of very inconvenient facts that Max then had to adjust to. But the story of the book really is what the slide you see on the screen, which is relates to Kane's job paving streets in Pittsburgh in let me get this right, about 1890. He didn't do it very long, but it was the moment in his life when he started to pick up a pencil and not just draw on his fantasies and pretty landscapes, but to actually make drawings that were designs. I had a chance to lift one of those blocks. They weigh about 35 pounds each. And so for the workmen who were busy engaged there and lifting blocks for 8 to 10 hours a day, you wanted to get the block in the right place the first time. And Kane talked about laying out streets. And after I read about his words on that subject, I realized that the same kinds of things that lay out the streets, lay out as paintings. That if you think about Pittsburgh streets, and you all know them well, they're cavernous and deep. Traffic and pedestrians flow up and down like rivers of people. High buildings on either sides like hills contain and direct the traffic. And then when you look at a painting like along the Lincoln Highway, which is in the collection of the museum here, you realize that he's just laid out another street. You can see the lines of travel, the rivers, the roads, the paths, the ridges of the hills. You can imagine walking deep into that landscape the way you can walk deep into a Pittsburgh street. And then, like any Pittsburgh street of the time, you fill in those travel lines with patterns. Patterns created by massive stone blocks in the streets, and by plants, flowers, water, trees, fields, houses, roads, clouds in the painting. And the connection between Kane's life, which Max was writing in his section, and his art, which I was exploring in mine, we just got more and more closely tied together as we worked.
One of the things that I wanted to mention about John Kane in terms of his character, which really was examining as it comes through in his art, is that Kane was the most intentional and intense worker in humanity. He was always working really hard in a very focused way, not just on his art, but on every job he did. He wanted to be the best as a steel worker. He wanted to be the best as a street paver, as a building figure. And he worked long hours, being the best at all of these things, while he also was refining his art and getting better and better and more accomplished. And in that, and the fact that Kane throughout his life gradually from one job to another, one career to another, he reminds me a lot of Pittsburgh itself. Hardworking, focused, intensely dedicated to the work, and able to reinvent itself. If you think of Pittsburgh, how it reinvented itself, era to era to era. And Kane, every time he met a challenge, would reinvent himself. A lot of that shows up in this picture with Kane called Touching Up, in which he is working on one thing that we'll talk about in a minute, but also showing on the walls a lot of the other very colorful paintings that Kane did. And that's a transition in Kane's life and work that was absolutely pivotal. He knew it too. It was his transition from drawing to color. And it happened when he went to work with a company called Steel Car Company in Keysport on the Ohio River, which made boxcars. And Kane was hired to paint the boxcar red. But on his lunch break one day, he found a storeroom of one of the massive manufacturing buildings. And I found that day. I found the storeroom. Kane went into the storeroom on his lunch break and saw there were all kinds of buckets of different color paint. And he got them out and he started painting a picture on the side of a boxcar. And fortunately, he had a very understanding foreman. We showed up and said, "Oh, all right, you want a picture on the boxcar, you can do it. But then you got to paint over the boxcar red. It's like, and so that was his transition to color. And this is more about construction and composition. So maybe you want to figure out.
Well, I'm going to switch back for just a minute. To say that as Max was writing the biography, I was studying these pictures, realizing that many of these paintings, Kane was actually trying to tell us his life story in paintings. And this one is interesting because it was painted in 1931, 32, long after he had achieved fame. But he's showing himself as a younger man at this sort of breakthrough moment painting the Gettysburg Address. And he's showing off all of his different kinds of painting accomplishments. He's a decorative painter, as you can tell from the walls. He's a portrait painter, a scene painter, a religious painter, and now an icon painter. And then there's also the interesting touch of the chest of drawers there in the background with the dirty laundry peeking out from within. A hint, a clue that there's more going on than meets the eye. And Max's story about the boxcar painting led me to look at his oil paintings, especially after he had finished his work with the Standard Steel and Press Steel companies. As I was going, okay, he learned how to draw from working on street paving. What did he learn from painting the boxcars? And it wasn't just being able to have suddenly a large blank space to paint on for him. But boxcar painting wasn't just about the ground color and the top color. It was about the logo of the railroad company. It's about the registration numbers and all of the other information that that boxcar had to carry. And some pieces of color were very specific. So he actually, this is where he learned how to paint in layers. And you've got the ground layer, you've got the red for the boxcar. On this painting, he covers the boxcar red ground with gold leaf. That would be the final shiny coat on the top of the boxcar. We have Abraham Lincoln in this picture instead of a steelworker, but the idea is the same. The head floats on this solid colored surface. The American flag replaces the railroad company logo that he would have painted onto the boxcar. And then instead of the registration numbers and the name of the railroad company, he has inscribed the Gettysburg Address. So this is basically a boxcar painting technique translated into what would become a wonderful work of fine art. And this is where Kane stood technically up until the moment of his breakthrough at Kane. And he, as Max said, he always wanted to be the best, and he never stopped trying to learn. He didn't go to art school, although he had opportunities to, claiming that it was too expensive and would have prevented him from earning a living. But in some ways, I think that it was also reflected in his preference. He studied works of art in books and in galleries, and when he had enough money after his breakthrough, and here I'm going to continue with the story of his development as an artist and painter, he bought a town. And he developed its use. Now, this is the case of his dependence on photos. Max, oh, this is on me. Okay. His first use of photos were as replacements for drawings. He never did learn how to draw the human figure. And almost every human figure painting that I have been able to study firsthand is based on another image, whether it be photograph or another painting. Even the breakthrough Carnegie International picture that has become an icon in this story is based on a 1919 photograph of two Scottish girls published in the Illustrated London News, which he clipped out. So this is an amazing survival. This is an example of a photograph that Kane painted over, submitted to an exhibition, and then was exposed by a rival artist in the course of the exhibition, leading to an enormous scandal of how Kane, this great American original, was in fact simply painting over photographs. It's a technique he had learned 20 years before, when painting over photographs was the standard practice. It was a way to create a cheap colored portrait of someone. But he sends these pictures to exhibitions where this kind of work is frowned upon.
If I can add to that, my favorite part of that story, because his competitor, Milo Petrovitz, was hoping to expose John Kane, because Kane was getting the recognition that Petrovitz at that time was not getting, and to humiliate John Kane. But the result of it was that other artists and art critics And curators from museums all rushed to John Kane's defense and explained, first of all, that the pictures that he's best known for weren't painted over anything. And secondly, he was using the pictures not to paint over them, but as something to study and learn from. So the whole art world came to John Kane's defense, and it was kind of a very heartening moment. And you wanted to mention Hopper's role.
Yeah. The year after this picture created a scandal, Edward Hopper was invited to Pittsburgh to jury an Associated Artists Pittsburgh exhibition, and he awarded the prize to a different artist whose work was also almost immediately exposed to be a painted over photograph. And this is sort of this put Kane in different contexts, but it also led to an extraordinary newspaper story written by Edward Hopper, in which he explained why he thought Kane was a great artist. And he basically said, Kane's technique may not be the most sophisticated, but this is an artist who has something to say. Unlike many of the artists today, whose technique is advanced, but who tell us nothing. And this from the phrase American realists alive at the time. And I found that Hopper's perception and those of other artists over time have been the most helpful to me in terms of understanding Kane and what he was trying to do. But the other reason we have this picture in the sequence is that Kane was making, when he couldn't get a job in industry or as a laborer, he was making and selling these kinds of images to members of his worker community as a way of supplementing income. And so turning things out quickly, making colorful, attractive, and wonderful pictures for a working class audience was where he got started.
Okay, this is good. You know, wherever Kane went, wherever he was going, he was sketching or painting his life story, as we always said earlier. This is a part of his life story that took place in Oakland Magistrates Court after John Kane came home drunk and set the house on fire. This is Kane on the right. They are kept on. John Kane has his hand up. And the conclusion of the judge at the end of this procedure was to tell John, stay away from home, which he did for years and years at a time. But the backstory on this was that John Kane had a very serious problem with alcohol. He was an alcoholic almost all his life. He was a barroom brawler, and a barroom brawler who was so successful in barroom fights. He became a prize fighter. He never lost in the barroom. So everybody said, John, you got to do some money. And he did. He became a prize fighter for a period of time. But alcohol haunted his whole life. As devoted as he was to his family, he really was devoted to his family. He left home for long periods of time. He was absent. He caused problems when he was at home, like this. It interfered with his work as a laborer. It interfered with his work as a painter. I think one of the ironies in his life is Kane died in 1934. It was in 1935 that Alcoholics Anonymous was founded in Akron, Ohio, which, by the way, was one of the places where Kane worked for 8 or 9 years. So he never got help. He struggled hard against alcohol. I think his wife, Maggie, back to him at the end of his life, appreciated his struggle, but he never really overcame it. And one of the things that I thought a lot of, I follow Louise's comment about Kane staying away from the formal training is, if John Kane had not been an alcoholic, or he had stopped drinking, and the only help alcoholics got back then was from the Temperance Society or the Catholic Church. If he had managed to stop drinking and he had gotten training as an artist, would he have been a greater painter or a lesser? I don't.
Yeah. This drawing, had never been published before our book came out. It was a revelation, when it was sent to us from the gallery sent to Ken. And it offered remarkable insight into Kane's personal life and struggles, but it also taught me something about why and how he made art. And that, of course, is the fact that on each of the main figures, he actually wrote their words. It's like a comic strip almost. You've got Kane confessing, the policeman describing the arrest, Mrs. Kane describing her trials as his wife, and the magistrate saying, "You stay away from her and drive 2 weeks in jail."
And the prosecutor saying, "Send him to jail."
Exactly. So, but this is an unusual practice for an artist. But what is suggested to me is that John Kane literally embeds stories into the figures in his art. And so I think of his pictures not necessarily as narratives, but as embedded stories, where there's a story in each of the main elements of his pictures, not just the figure paintings, but the landscapes. And these proved to be led to some wonderful detective stories for us.
I mentioned earlier that John Kane was very reluctant to leave Scotland when he did at a young age. And all of his life, the images of Scotland came back to him, and he remembered in a very nostalgic way his life in Scotland. The two girls left behind at the top are probably his sisters. And the flute is a flute Kane played as a little boy. He was a part of a band with Scotch and Irish students in Westmoreland. And he played the flute, and he kept it with him for the rest of his life. He took it with him everywhere he went and played Scottish tunes on it as a way of bringing back his memories of Scotland. Sadly, he never did after Scotland, and I think it was a sadness for John.
The Girl I Left Behind is the name of a very popular folk song, both in Scotland and in the United States. And it is the story, it is the song of a young man who would sing or play to his beloved as he marched off to war or to emigrate or to a job at some other place. It's a classic. You can download it from iTunes. And it was a song that Kane associated with his separations from his family. In this case, although the tune is The Girl I Left Behind, he shows two girls, which tells you it's about his family. It could be either his two sisters who he left behind when he emigrated to Scotland, or it could be the two daughters who he left behind in Pittsburgh as he moved around the country seeking work. And so it's a double-edged image. And these images, which the song is a gay and happy song with this bittersweet note of "I'm leaving, I don't know if I'm coming back." And Kane is both you can interpret it just as a folk subject, but also as a deeply personal memory.
So this, as you know, upstairs, is the picture that John Kane accepted at the 1927 Carnegie International. But the story itself tells you a lot about John's character. As I mentioned earlier, he was absolutely dogged about his work and about his art. He was relentless in pursuing the best in accomplishment that he pursued. But when he got good enough that he felt at the time that he was worthy of some recognition, he was relentless in pursuing recognition. He came to the Carnegie International in 1925. Even back then, the Carnegie International, which was held every year then, not every 4 years, as it is today. Even then, it was one of the premier art competitions in the country. And John came there in 1925 in his painter's overalls, carrying some pictures up the steps of the Carnegie Museum of Art, and he was rejected. You know, in effect, they said to him, this is not for people like you, this is for real artists. But Kane came back the next year and tried again. And that year he was rejected again, but he got a very nice letter from Homer St. Claus, who was the director of the Carnegie Museum of Art. St. Claus was the son of Augustus St. Claus, the famous sculptor. And Homer St. Claus was encouraged, even though he was rejected. 1927, Kane was back again. And this time, he had a stroke of very good luck. Because on the jury, there was an artist from Brooklyn named Andrew Casper. And Casper had been trained in Paris. And he had worked with Pablo Picasso and others. But he saw Pablo Picasso's efforts to champion the work of France's famous self-taught artist, Henri Rousseau. And as Picasso had championed Rousseau, and Rousseau gained recognition, and Gasper decided he would be a champion for John Kane. And I don't think Lulu may or may not disagree. This is one of Kane's better pictures, but it's the one that Gasper selected. And Kane immediately became very, very famous. Magazine articles, newspaper articles, they written about all over the country, not just in Pittsburgh. There was in pictures, the pictures began to sell. Eventually, some of the most wealthy collectors in America were buying his pictures. Some of the most renowned museums in America were hanging his work. So finally, 1927, and he was how old? He was 67. He became famous. So this moment of redemption for a life of dedicated hard work.
And Pat McArdle showed me the photograph that John Kane used to make for the figures of the two dances. And the figure of the paper is based on a postcard, which he put together to make this composition, which he then told everyone was located in Pittsburgh. And this is the kind of collage that he would put together, bits and pieces of stories related to his past, to Pittsburgh, to the present, and by sheer chance and good luck, also corresponded to a bunch of themes and ideas that American modern artists were getting to think about. One of them was the transition away from abstraction, the desire to develop works of art that had American subjects or based on American places. And the appeal of an artist who had no European training, whose origins, although it was Scottish in origin, his art originated in the United States and could be seen as quintessentially American because it was void of European modern influences. At the same time, because Kane had been an industrial laborer, a bridge builder, an iron worker, his understanding of what you might call the machine age aesthetic was intimate and personal. And so the crispness, clearness, clarity, the abstract qualities, the abstract coloring in his pictures would also appeal to advocates of machine age design and aesthetic. And so with Kane at this moment in American art history, he is the perfect combination of aesthetic quality and personal history. And his pictures are wonderful. He did have an amazing sense of design cultivated over his years as a worker. But once he broke through at the Carnegie International in 1927, Kane's career and his development as an artist really blossomed. And although I've often read that folk art and outsider artists don't change over time. In point of fact, once Kane had the opportunity to socially interact with other artists of stature, both in Pittsburgh and from around the world and internationals, He also now had access to their technical skills and techniques. They associated artists in Pittsburgh took him under their wing in 1928. He found other people, other artists who had careers as housekeepers like he did, but who had parallel night careers as fine artists, and he learned. The money he earned from the sale of his first paintings in 1927, 1928 went to the purchase of a camera, a Kodak portable Brownie camera, nothing fancy. And he carried it with him as he wandered around Pittsburgh, and owning that camera freed him from reliance on the Illustrated London News or picture postcards or other published sources. He could now take photographs of the subjects that interested him and combine them into the paintings that he wanted to make. And as a result, photographs stopped their function as an artistic crutch and switched to become a tool in his development of his art and his art. And the photographs which survive in the local collection are tiny. I mean, he only had the money to have a little 1x2 inch contact prints made. He never blew them up to a large scale. But the ones that survive are often covered with fingerprints in red and brown and green paint. So we know that he's actually holding them up as he was working on his pictures. And here are two examples of photographs by Kane that he would incorporate into one of his most famous landscapes. And they look like nothing. And until you know what's going on in these pictures, you don't understand why they're important. This is a workhouse in insane asylum on the north side of Pittsburgh, what is now beyond Aspen. And this is the train that connected the Aspenwall Waterworks to the main line. Kane worked and helped build the Aspenwall Waterworks, but he also he had several sojourns in workhouses and asylums like this one, as a result of his alcoholism and problems like that. There are at least 3 known incarcerations, all of them short term, where he was sent to recover, pull himself together, and get started again. But he also painted scenes like, he also photographed scenes like the river boats here, which turned up in almost all of his next paintings later on. And here is the wonderful painting. He did 3 versions of it. I'm showing the Carnegie version, but there's also a great version here at the Westmoreland of Coleman Hollow. And oops. Sorry. There's the riverboat. There's the asylum. And there's the train. And of course, as you can see from the way those photographs got combined with this landscape, the landscape is a work of art independent of the photographs. They serve almost as notes, reminders. Here's what this building looked like. Here's what this barge looked like. But he designs his own street and he places those plots where he wants them to be. But he's telling you a Workman's story here. Because another place that he photographed is this one. This is an amusement park that only existed for a couple of years. He photographed it several times. But you get a sort of workman's pilgrim's progress here through to a workplace. The center of the composition is this wonderful amusement park designed for laborers Saturday and Sunday afternoon of free time when they have them. He called them pleasure parks, where you went for color, fun, gaiety, see other people, drink, dance, and enjoy the rides. It's a very short road to the asylum. And that was his point. It's a sort of modern village progress. But when he talked about this picture to one of the patrons who bought the first version of it, what he really wanted to point out was the light on the distant hills and how it was his desire to get to that light. And that's the third path, a much more difficult one. No easy roads, no steam engines to get you from one to the other. this was a much more difficult, distant, and ambitious goal. And that is, it more or less expresses his philosophy and experience in life. We put this picture, I put this picture in because it's another typical Pittsburgh landscape, but it's by a British Impressionist artist who showed at the Carnegie International. And I put it in to contrast the difference in the way the paint's handled, the difference in subject matter. And it's the same subject matter with a whole different feeling. There are no stories embedded in that painting. Here we go. There are no stories embedded in Alfred Beast's painting the same way they are in Kane's painting. It is the impressionist picture. It's an optical experience. You get a sense of the atmosphere, the color, the shapes, but you have no idea what the people in that landscape might have been doing or would be doing, or even if there are people there at all. Whereas with the Kane, it's full of activity. Each of those elements has a meaning and a story, and the story it's not an objective piece of observation. It is a carefully constructed narrative of the world. And this is very distinctly Kane.
Lulu mentions Kane's moral sense and how that moral sense drives his storytelling in his art. It was very much a Catholic moral sense. John Kane was raised a Catholic by a mother who was devoted to Catholicism. All through his life, he went to Mass mostly every day, but at least several times a week. Even when he was drinking more, he would go to Mass. And he felt very strongly about the values that he thought God in his life. And they were Christian Catholic values that he referred to in the things that he wrote, the things that he said, and the art that he created. This is, of course, a knockoff of the PSI. But being John Kane, he put his own life in, of course. You see in the lower left there, I believe that was also John Kane. And, yeah, that's John Kane. I think it might be that the Madonna is his mother. And of course, there's St. Peter's Church in Oakland right behind him, and the people of Workman in Oakland. So again, John Kane is telling a Catholic story about the values that have driven his life and putting the elements of his life in a familiar picture that he had got.
Yeah, you can see the picture upstairs in the exhibition. It's there. It's an amazing, strange and moving picture. There's even more to the story. And Kane appears as a donor figure. In the medieval altarpiece this is based on, the donor is the person who paid for the painting in hopes that by providing this painting for others enlightenment, he will then be absolved of his sins and have a shot at heaven. Which was, given the fact that Kane had a long history as a sinner, this was a major concern at the beginning of his life. My speculation about this picture is that the Madonna figure is actually a representation of his wife Maggie, and the dead figure of Christ refers to the fact that they had a son who died within 24 hours of birth, and whose death precipitated some of the darkest years of John Kane's life, leading to suicide attempts, abandonment of his family, incarceration, and then years of travel in this country. And of course, the two kneeling figures in the original altarpiece are no saints, but they could easily be considered to be the two daughters who are joined with their mother in mourning the loss of the son. And Kane presents himself as detached from the family, as a penitent sinner, hoping for absolution. And so it gets very personal and very deep very quickly. Another interesting part of the story is that after his death, Mrs. Kane offered this painting to Mercy Hospital in consideration for the care that the hospital provided at the end of his life. And so the picture actually did literally serve as an offering. But there's also a reference to the fact here that as the penitent donor, Kane is also referring to the labor of his last years of life as he painted and sold pictures to provide his family with some kind of legacy. And in fact, his death was covered in the papers in Pittsburgh. And the story unfolded in the newspapers. He left a legacy of $4,700, which his family knew nothing about and was only revealed after his death. And so he is literally a repentant donor, and this picture is about his repentance. This is his last picture. It was unfinished when he died. He was painting it for the 1934 Huntington International, and they waived their rules about deceased artists in order to show it. It's his final statement about Pittsburgh, and I could go on about this picture for hours, but I won't. It's at the Heinz History Center, and it's called Crossing the Junction. And as you see, there are 4 trains approaching a crossing there. The north-south trains will go under the bridge, the east-west trains will go over it, and so there will not be a giant collision. But the story that these 4 trains represent, this is Kane summing up his life, his family's life in Pittsburgh. He was one of 4 brothers. 2 of his brothers were killed in train accidents. And his brother Patrick lost an arm in a train accident, and Kane lost a leg. And so here are the 4 brothers meeting. Is the way I would interpret this picture. It's 4 trains approaching a crossing point. Kane is the last of the brothers to arrive. At this point, he is about to cross the junction to Workman. There are other junctions in this picture. There is the bridge above, where cars, newfangled automobiles are driving back and forth, connecting suburban commuters to their jobs in the city. The trains were for less advantaged people, and for the poorest, like Kane himself, they would have been hopping trains and riding on the roofs and in the cattle cars for free. So there is a landscape here that is a class landscape as well as a family landscape. But Kane is always, again, the light on the distant hills matters for him. He gives you ways to cross the tracks. He gives you steps up the hill so that you can get to the top where the sun and the air are clean and bright. And at the top of this hill, on the far side, right up there, he puts radio tower, which is a reference to the kind of heavenly music that you get up in the heights, as well as to Pittsburgh's innovative history in radio, as well as industry, railroads, and art.
So that was John Kane's last picture, and arguably his best picture. I think it was certainly one of his best, if not his best. So to wind up on that note, his last picture, our lecture, what finally Lulu wanted to mention is our conception in the earliest point, which she and I started talking about how we would shape the book, was that it could be a moment of sort of regeneration of the legacy, the reputation of John Kane. And so early on in the production of the book, we went to the John Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh to talk to them